All right, we are live, my friend. It's good to see you, Jim Levert.
You too, Jordan Crowley.
Thank you for coming on Happy Dance's Guide to the Revolution.
Yep, wouldn't miss it.
Yeah, I knew when I had the idea to start this that you were one of the people that I definitely wanted to get on here.
I'm glad I made an impression on you.
Yeah, working at old J Rank Electric there, back in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. I look back fondly on those times and the good conversations we had, and you're an interesting guy with some interesting takes, so I'm really, really grateful to have you on here.
Thanks. Right back at you.
And there were good times there too, man. Like the Rank, I have nothing but utmost respect for the Rank family and that whole company. Like, what a good family and a good doing good work and hiring good people. And I was like a young guy who like coming straight out of school with not much experience, but I was all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and they took a shot on me. They took.
You had to be bright-eyed because you had your lights off.
That's right. I forgot about that, huh? Used to work in there conserving electricity with my lights off, and everybody.
The guy who's in that office now, he does the same thing.
Does he really? See, I'm a trend starter.
I guess so.
And is young Bobby Joker still there too?
Yep.
Good. He's a stand-up guy too, I think. Yeah. Good to see that.
Me and Pete, Jeff, Bobby. I think that's about it. That's there that you knew.
Yeah. Yeah, and we used to get into some semi-political, semi-philosophical, whatever you want to call them, conversations. And I remember one of the last ones that we had. You tried to bet me $1 that Trump was going to win the 2016 election, and I didn't take the bet, and I'm glad I didn't, because obviously you ended up correct exchange. So I guess my first question, what made you so confident at the time that he was going to win? I mean, it's only $1 bet, but you were pretty confident, and I guess like at the time that wasn't the way that the news was kind of reporting it. So what made you so confident that was the way it was going to shake out?
Well, because instantaneously I recognized the fact that we finally had somebody running for office that was different. He was unliked by both parties coming in, and that was who I felt America needed. And I also felt that a lot of people besides me recognized it. So it was a no-brainer, really. His ideas, the direction he wanted to take us was exactly what a lot of people who were fed up with the government were hoping he would do, or we would get somebody to vote for. That would be like that.
Yeah. And I have lots of bullet points on my little sheet here for Trump. So we're going to talk all about Trump. I want to get your take on the Declaration of Independence that I wrote up before. And one of the things you said is the two-party system's getting old. I entirely agree. I think that's some of the focus there is kind of moving us away from that. So what are your thoughts on it? I mean, shoot it to me straight. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that, in my opinion, they should just have candidates who run for office, and there should be no party affiliated with them at all. And it strictly stands up by their ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not for a group of people who smoke cigars in the back rooms and don't give a crap about anybody, but people who are there because they want to do good.
Yep. I think a lot of people feel that way, and that's one of the reasons I was motivated to do this. Is people seem pretty unhappy with the current setup, and it makes sense. I mean, I think it's by design, Yeah. Well, so let's get into some of the other items here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the way it is right now, Jordan, is that is almost as much division as you might have seen in the Revolutionary War. I mean, nobody's killing anybody yet, but you can have people in your family. I personally have people in my family who just can't handle that I'm a Trump supporter, and I haven't talked to them since back then, and it's kind of sad.
Yeah, and one of the things you said when we exchanged some kind of messages there via Facebook Messenger is you're disappointed, hate of love, and I didn't want to get it too much into it there via text because I wanted to save the good stuff for this conversation. But I think that's like a mistake there, because I don't think it's love that they're doing. It's something different. It's compassion. And compassion and love are related, but they're not the same thing, right? So if you have compassion for the less fortunate, you probably tend to be more liberal, more left-leaning, right? But that's not necessarily the highest virtue. There's other things that are important, like truth and, hard work. There's lots of virtues that are important, and just putting compassion for the less fortunate as the utmost top virtue and then kind of standing that ground and claiming moral high ground, I think is not useful. And it's creating this hatred that you're talking about, and it's real. And I'm not sure what to do about it other than keep talking.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's just not important enough. And the sooner we all realize that those government officials that we take sides against each other in support of, all of them are against us. They don't have our best interests in mind. They really don't. Very few of them. The people that are in there, we've got people in there for 40 years getting rich. They don't care what we have going on. They really don't.
Yeah.
So it's ludicrous to me to have people fighting each other when over politicians who don't care about us.
Yep.
It's asinine.
Yeah.
And from my perspective,
that's one of the.
From my perspective, it's predominantly, not totally, but it's really seemingly predominant that the Democrat side of the aisle is the one that is really, being dishonest. For years, for decades, they've been telling poor people in minority communities and this and that they're going to do something, and for decades and decades, it never gets better. So that's something over and over again is the definition of insanity. So, it's kind of silly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do these people
keep
voting?
Yeah. It's hard to know who to believe too, because you're promised so many things and nobody is held accountable hardly, and it's definitely frustrating. And so one of the things that you brought up that I want to ask you about is you said that the Dems have kind of flip-flopped on some things over the past 4 years. Things that they used to be against, they're for now, simply because they hate Trump. And I was wondering if you can give me like one or two examples of something where you feel like they've kind of switched sides in order to kind of counter what Trump's doing or saying.
That's an easy one. Right off the bat is immigration. All of them voted for updating fencing and new barriers and, stopping the flow of illegal immigrants coming over here, stopping the flow of drugs and human trafficking and everything else. Yep. They all voted for it under Obama. Obama deported more people and built all those fucking cages, pardon my French.
Mm-hmm. You can carry.
And now they're all against it. It's a total and utter transparent flip-flop just to make sure that Trump doesn't, he can't make good as easily on his promise because they're going to block him. Mm-hmm. So there's one. Another one. Well, this impeachment thing is another one. These very same people who are leading this effort for impeachment, when Bill Clinton was getting impeached, were hollering up and down that they can't do it unless it's bipartisan and everybody agrees. Yet right now, the only bipartisan thing that's happened in this impeachment is that it was bipartisanly voted against going forward with the inquiry. There were 3 Democrats that voted along with all of the Republicans. So to me, that's another flip-flop. I mean, the list goes on and on if I could sit here and spout them off. But.
Yeah, that's good. 2 examples is good. Let's touch on the first one first, because it's like ultimately these things come down to like competing values. That's kind of how I feel, and which comes down to like cumulative truth. And I talked with you a little bit about truth and love and didn't really get fully into it, but cumulative truth is important to me, right? Because it's like, do we want like an open floodgate with anyone and everyone coming into this country with like no restrictions whatsoever? Like, no, we probably don't want that, right? But you also probably don't want like no flow of people and no flow of ideas and like a complete restriction, right? So there's somewhere in between there, right? So the competing value is like, again, it's like the compassion for the less fortunate. Like people see these people as, people who are in favor of less like more open borders see these people as like really wanting to come here because their home situation is not good, and they see this as an opportunity to kind of improve their lives and improve their family lives. And if you have compassion for the less fortunate, that's important to you, you know. But if you're more orderly and structured and rule focused, which is typically characteristic of people who are more conservative, you don't want that. You want firm boundaries, and you want strict rules, and you want people to follow those rules. And
what we want is it's a merit-based immigration system. And it's also really important to draw the distinction between illegal immigration and legal immigration. There's a big difference between illegal and legal, and already legally we take in, I don't know what the number is, but it's millions, and that's fine. If you pass the background checks, you get your health checked, you bring something to the table, you come here with a desire to assimilate into our society, then that's a good thing. I'm the son of an immigrant. My dad came here from France when I was, when he was like in his 20s. So if he hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here. So I appreciate legal immigration when it's done right. What I don't appreciate is people sneaking around in the middle of the night. And as far as, people with less fortunate because their home countries aren't good, where does it end? Do we take everybody from inner city Harlem and they can have free run of Beverly Hills because their area is bad? They get to go over. No, that's not how it works in life. We all earn our way through this world. And if it wasn't this big capitalistic society, it'd be who built the best, tree bark house and hunted enough, animals to live. So it's been on and on. Back in the caveman days, if somebody would have came over and said, hey, we're going to take half of that deer because we don't have any over in our land, they'd have got a club in the head.
Right. Well, it's both, though, too, right? It's like there was this time in our tribal history where sharing was important because let's say you got a deer today and I didn't get one, but it might have been in your best interest to share that deer with me because tomorrow I might get one and you might not, right?
That's
but there's like
difference. That's different though. You're talking about a barter system or basically a capitalized system that's based off of services and animals and farming and whatever else. That's a whole different deal. A society that's set up on trading, my farm stuff for your hunting. It's a different deal. It's not really what I'm talking about, but.
Well, I'm agreeing with what you're saying, but what I'm kind of trying to point out is that there's a balance, right? It's like the answer isn't share nothing ever, right? Because that's not necessarily good for you. Like you trade your time for money, right? You trade your skills and your time for money, and you use that money to trade for things that you need, right? But there used to be kind of boulders around our tribe, and like you said, you wouldn't share with somebody outside the tribe because they're not part of your community. They're not part of your family. They're not going to necessarily share back with you. In fact, they're more likely to try to kill you than they are to share with you, right? But now we've come to this point where
let me interrupt you. I want to put it into the framework of your movement here. And you talked about your father's house and having a keen eye to keep all the rooms looking nice. Do we trust somebody we don't know to come in and help us out with that? No, we don't. We very carefully and lovingly take care of that house, and we certainly aren't going to let some stranger come in who doesn't share the same values and doesn't have the same keen eye and takes advantage of it and doesn't have the best of the house in mind.
So let me counter that because you sort of do, right? I mean, if I, for example, were to hire a plumber, like I don't know any plumbers. Whoever I hire is essentially a stranger to me, right? But they've built some established reputation from other interactions that they've had. So in a sense, like I do have to trust strangers. Like I have to trust people who I don't know.
But Jordan, you would have went to the Better Business Bureau. You would have looked for Yelp reviews. You would have vetted those people before you let them into your father's house. You wouldn't have let them sneak in the back door in the middle of the night and just start working on shit.
Right. Exactly.
You'd check them out first.
Yes, I understand.
And you would have let them come here under a merit base. You'd let them in their house because they have a skill to share with the activities you got going on. You didn't let them in.
I know they did a good
job. So I'm going to let them in. You don't say that. You're going to, maybe you'll let somebody stay there, of course, because you're generous and everything. But When 5,000 people come just because they're poor doesn't mean that you get to trash your house that you've been working so hard to take care of. What you will do though is you'll investigate, make sure the people coming in, you'll talk about it outside on the porch, determine how good they are and what they have in mind, and then you'll make a decision whether or not you let them in or not.
Yeah. And part of the problem here is that technology has changed so rapidly, right? I kind of see us as these tribal animals, and now technology has enabled us to live in a global world where there are people who want to be part of your tribe, and it's like, I don't know, are we supposed to let them in? What are you supposed to do? It's like,
gotta check them out.
We don't live in this age where say again?
You got to check them out first. You got to look at their background, see what kind of tools they have to offer to bring to the table.
Yep.
To contribute.
Okay. So you asked me to do a homework assignment, a little bit. The specific question I think you asked was 3 things that Trump has done that I liked, and 3 things that Trump has done that I haven't liked.
Right.
So I came up with a little here. Which ones do you want first? You want the things that I like, or you want things I don't like first?
Whichever ones you feel passionately about.
Well, it's funny because when you say passionately, there's a lot of things that he did that I almost felt neutral about. I almost felt uneducated as to whether or not it was good or bad. I almost saw both sides of it. I'm trying to think of what a good example was. Some of the stuff with trade and and taxes. I don't know. I'm not an expert at that. Was it a good move? Was it a bad move? I know some people feel a certain way about it, and some people, but so I'm going to just kind of ignore those for right now. There's a lot of things that he did that I was kind of felt neutral, either through ignorance or through just kind of seeing the both sides. So for right now, I'm just going to put those on the shelf. You can bring those up afterwards if you want.
Well, I'm going to mark you up a point. I'll mark you up a point that you had issues that you were on the fence about and didn't automatically go against. So you get a point, Jordan. I'm writing it down.
Oh, good. Standing next to you, I said this on my podcast last week. Standing next to you, I'm probably a liberal. Standing next to a liberal, I'm probably a conservative. I really do feel like I'm that sort of in between, and really try to take a balanced approach to these things, But anyway, okay, let's do the things that I didn't like. And they're all kind of under the same umbrella theme, I would say, which is, to me, not only one of the subjects that I'm most educated on and experienced with, but also that I'm most passionate about, which is energy and environmental issues. Sure. So the 3 things are withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement. I feel like that was sort of selfish and short-sighted, and it's not the type of leading by example that I would like our country to try to do, even though it's difficult and there's some sacrifices we have to make to kind of reach our climate goals. I don't agree with that move. The second one is what he did to the EPA, kind of dismantling the EPA. I really feel like that's there to protect us, to protect our air, to protect our water, to protect our people from essentially industries polluting without consequence, and I feel like kind of making that weaker ultimately impacts all of us, and I'm not for that. And the last one, also energy related, signing the permit for the Keystone XL pipeline. I understand that, oil is important and everything, transportation wise runs on it. But I would really like to see us move towards renewable energy future more rapidly. And the more we kind of enable this long-term addiction to fossil fuels, I think just hurts us in the long run, because we're going to have to switch eventually. If what they're saying about the climate's real, we're going to have to deal with these issues, and prolonging it is only going to make it worse. So they're kind of all under the same umbrella, but those are the 3 top things that I, after doing research, that I did not like that he did.
Got ya. Okay. I kind of figured you wouldn't like it. What was it about what was in the Paris Agreement that would have caused us to lead better by example than we are now? Would you say that right now
I think it's
aren't we a leader? Would we be in the top 10 leaders of the world at least?
In terms of switching over to renewables?
That and just not polluting and stuff. Yeah.
Sure. I would say definitely. But I would also say that we could be doing more. We could be incentivizing these things more. And I would also say, if you compare us to some others, I know you brought up China and India, we kind of have an advantage over them that we've been burning coal and big power plants for a lot longer than they have. So it's kind of an unfair comparison. And that doesn't mean that they can get off scot-free and they can burn forever, right? But it's, we had the luxury of kind of using all this technology for a lot longer than some of those folks had. So, but I do think that we are doing a lot and we are leading. But to kind of remove ourselves from that, it's kind of like, to me, it like removes that good faith effort that, yes, we're all here, we're all going to try, we're all in this together. This is a shared planet. And exiting that felt wrong to me. It felt short-sighted. It felt like it's this America first thing that he's all about, which is like, I get it. Like, he's the president of the United States of America. It's natural to put America first, right? But it's also, we're a community. It's a world community that impacts all of us. So I do feel that was a mistake on his part, or something I didn't like. Maybe you wouldn't call it a mistake, but something I was not in favor of.
Yeah, I can't really talk too much about it because, like you, I'm more into the taxes and the other things that you're not into. And as far as the nitty gritty of the Paris Climate Accord, I don't know the ins and outs of it. All I know is that whatever it is, it would have been really expensive. And the articles that I did read about it, the gist of them were that the benefit versus the cost was definitely skewed in the not worth it column, from the sources that I looked at. And what was the second thing again you told me?
EPA.
EPA. Yeah. You don't think that was a bloated bureaucracy that could have trimmed up? I mean,
maybe it was, but I think, the question it raises is like, what is the role of government? Like, what?
I was going to ask you, since having the EPA dismantled, like you said, that's an extreme word. Has there been companies that have polluted? Have there been companies since then that are polluting with impunity, with no repercussions, that weren't before that you know of?
That's a fair question, and I don't know. You could be right. It could be a completely bloated bureaucracy that's just a dumpster fire and completely wasting money.
I would say that.
It could also be
there's
protecting us from
things. There's good things about it, I'm sure, but I just think it gets a little overboard. Like, for instance, when the EPA came in and decided to start classifying, anything bigger than 20 foot in diameter in Michigan to be a protected wetland, became ridiculous, and people in their own yards weren't able to, re-landscape or do things that they want to do in the yard because they've got a fucking 20-foot pond in the yard. It goes overboard. There's,
Yeah. And it's tricky, right? Because you kind of, again, it's like these competing values, right? And from like kind of like the libertarian side of things, it's like individual rights are the most important thing, But then you also have this government is created, and what I believe is one of its primary functions is to protect the commons, which is the air, the water, all of our common things that no one directly has an incentive, a monetary incentive to protect. I kind of, maybe there's a better way to protect those things, but the way it's structured right now, I do sort of feel like that's one of the government's primary roles, to protect that, right? If you're running a business and dumping pollutants into my water supply and my whole family's getting sick, like, that's a problem. Like, we can't have that, So.
And in that situation, whoever polluted there should have to clean it up.
Right. Yep. But we need these, maybe we don't, but it seems like these agencies are created to enforce those things and create policies that they kind of set those guidelines so people don't do that. So they have an incentive to not dump into the water supply, dump into whatever, because it's everyone's. It's a shared commodity, essentially,
Right, but it also then it reminds me of the old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think at the beginning we're all happy about it, and it's great, and it serves a purpose. But after a period of time, you run out of problems, and then you start inventing them and start looking for more and more and grabbing more and more market share over the commons. And I just feel like these are getting, these kind of departments get out of control. Same as like the Department of Education is out of control. They're making guidelines on a national level when that should be done locally. Each individual community knows what their children in the area need to learn, and what kind of curriculum they want to give them is should be up to them, not for some bureaucrat in Washington who's got a side deal after 40 years of being in office with the guy who wrote the book, and they're going to make millions of dollars off it while our kids get stupid and China gets smarter.
Yeah. And I think I like that quote, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I saw an example of that today, and it kind of alludes to what you're talking about. It's like we create a policy implementation, right? We think we create this policy, it's going to have this impact, but it doesn't. It has maybe it has an impact a little bit, but it also has 10 other impacts, right? And the example that I heard today was something that the state of California did. They tried to change the way that they taught reading to children because of high-level readers and how high-level readers read, by basically recognizing full words rather than letters, and teaching full word recognition rather than letters, and it completely backfired. They went from the best readers in the country in terms of by state to the bottom almost immediately after implementing this policy. So it's things are really complicated, right? So when you try to change them, the chances that you're going to screw it up are pretty high, So that's why when I use the language in the Declaration, it's we got to be careful. If we're doing renovations to the house, if we're going to be careful, we're going to have to think this through, and it might not work. You might build the room and say, oh, that doesn't work at all. And you might have to sacrifice again to renovate it one more time again. And that's why I also use the word continual need of improvement. It's the answer isn't don't try and don't implement anything, to not improve at all. But it's also, there's no Hitler's plan of the final solution, right? There's no final solution to anything. It's a continuous process. That's what I believe anyway.
Absolutely. It's called evolution.
That's right. Okay, so you want to hear the things that Trump did?
Yeah. I cannot.
I know you do. So, and these ones are not sort of under the same umbrella. They're definitely distinct and different in terms of their category that they're in. So the first one that I saw that I really liked was impose sanctions on Venezuela's where they use a socialist dictatorship. Now I've never been to Venezuela. I don't really know if it's socialist dictatorship, but everything I've heard is that it is. It's kind of like a cesspool of human suffering, and it went from one of the richest nations in terms of resources to some of the highest poverty levels. So anything we can do to kind of, not that we're preventing it by putting sanctions in, but anything we can do to discourage what they're doing there, I think is probably a good move. So I'm in favor of that, what he did there. So there's one for the guy.
What do you suppose the sanctions are intended to do? How do they make it better? Out of curiosity, what's your understanding?
And I didn't get into the specifics of it, but let's just use our imagination for a second. Let's say we were trading partners with them to some extent, and then we decided, hey, we're not going to trade. As long as you're doing these things and kind of imposing this socialist dictatorship, we're not going to be trading partners with you. And the U.S. is a valuable trading partner and a valuable ally, so you lose that. So whatever you were relying on us for, you don't have that anymore. So that's a big hit, I would.
Well, you know what happens?
Their operations, and they're going to.
The way that works, by the way, just so you understand, when they put sanctions on a country like that, what that does is it increases the poverty of the civilian population. The poverty gets worse under sanctions for the ordinary guy. I mean, the Jim and Jordans of the Venezuela communities are the ones who suffer. And what that does is these sanctions are intended to apply enough pressure on those people starving in the streets to rise up against that government.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah, it's things have to get better before they can get worse, And if we continue to provide aid, it's probably only going to go in the pockets of the people at the top who are corrupt anyway. The people at the bottom aren't even going to see it anyway. So it's you're hurting those people, right? But it's also they're hurting anyway, And yeah, they have to take control and do something for themselves, Not that it's easy. I mean, we're trying to do the same thing here, to a different extent. But.
Yeah, they're doing it in Iran too.
Yep. Yep. Okay, the next thing I have on here is secured $6 billion to fight the opioid epidemic.
Nice.
So I think when I talked about this a little bit, kind of talking about my friend who was kind of struggling with addiction, and he was trying to get a flight back to Pennsylvania, and he was in a big hurry. And you're like, don't do it, man. He's an addict. Like, he's just going to, and that's exactly what he did. He did exactly what he said he was going to do. He took my money, came back, got back on drugs, ended up back in jail, never paid me back the money. So you were exactly right. But this is not, unique to me in any sense. Like, everyone's kind of, I don't know anybody who's not dealing with either personally or someone in their family or one of their friends who is struggling with addiction in some way. And if he's putting funding towards fighting that, then that's a good thing. Now, I know it's a little more complicated. It's not something as simple as like throw money at it and the problem goes away. I think addiction is a deeper problem. And I think it has like our lack of connections to other people. The fact that he's putting funding towards that, I think, is a really good thing. So hopefully they can make some progress there.
Do you happen to know whether or not he's doing more than the previous administration or the administrations before that?
I don't know for sure, but I would also say that the landscape has changed, right? I don't think this opioid crisis was as severe, let's say 10 years ago, as it is today, or even 5 years ago. I mean, maybe it was, but it seems like it's getting worse,
I think it boils down to this election.
But I don't know, relative or less than less.
I think there's a lot of problem with it being this electronic age. I think it's causing a lot of depression in young people and a lot of pressures that I know I didn't have to deal with when I was a kid. And I think it's a very major contributing factor to that drug problem.
Yep. There was Joe Rogan had, I wish I could remember the gentleman's name, but he was like an addictions expert. Like, he really looked at all the research and stuff. And there was some interesting experiments with rats that I think make a lot of sense. So basically, they ran an experiment with mice or rats or whatever, where you gave the rat two sources of water. The one source of water was like regular water, no big deal, and the other source of water was like mixed with either cocaine or heroin, something severely addictive that they would sort of enjoy in the short term, but would destroy them in the long term, right? So, and they created two different rat groups. One rat group was like isolated by themselves, nothing to do, no one to play with, They abused that drug immediately and were dead within like a week, with no connections, But then they had like another set of rats that were in like what they called like rat paradise or something. I forget what they called it. There was lots of other rats to play with. There was things to run on and play with. And after they tried the drug for like a day, they never went back, And I think that's the key, because we're like rats. I mean, we're not that different. We're social beings that operate on like this kind of platform of biology that's like, we need something. Like, you need to fill the void with something. And if you don't have anything and drugs are there, you're going to fill it with drugs. But if you have like family and you have connection with people, and that's one of the things he said was the opposite of addiction is connection. And I think that's true. People aren't connected, and it's probably deeper than that. And there's a lot more to it, but I do think it's like a real crisis, especially with like people. I mean, it's all ages. I can't say it's specific to me or my age group or anything like that, but I could say that I've dealt with it, man. Like, friends dead, friends in jail, friends recovering addicts, friends who are clean now that I just pray to God can stay clean,
Right.
So good to see him making progress there.
Sweet. Yep, I agree.
Yep. And then the last item here, the third item I have for things that Trump's done that I liked is secured $73 billion for Veterans Affairs, medical care for our military veterans. Now, you can agree with the war, you can disagree with the war, you can support the troops, you can not support the troops. But one thing I don't think we can do is like send these young men and women into traumatic situations where they endure physical and mental and emotional burdens for all of us, and then have them come back and not take care of them. Can't do that, If you're gonna put them through that, you got to finish the job and make sure that they're well taken care of, And to see that he's making some effort there, putting some money in towards that effort, I think is a damn good thing,
What else he's also done for him is he's also drafted and put through the House, and it's been passed and signed, and is legislation now that veterans can, if they have a wait, can just go to a regular hospital and the Veterans Administration will pay for it. They do not have to wait in lines anymore. They can walk in, see the line, and go to another.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah. The other thing is they passed another piece of legislation that he came up with, or his team, VA accountability. In the past, you couldn't fire somebody for any reason whatsoever. Now, if somebody's doing a bad job or they mistreat the patients, which we've heard so many horror stories about, they can be fired immediately and escorted off the property. So there's actually 3 things he's done.
All related to for veterans there. Wow. Yeah, any of these policies that like say you can't fire somebody under any, what does it make any sense at all? Does it? I don't understand when anyone would ever make such a policy. You know, it's like who in the, like, I mean, I like to say that I would continue to try and do a good job, but if that there was no consequences for my action, I can't like honestly say that I would give the same level of effort all the time, you know?
Right.
I don't know.
Did you know about those other 2 things that I mentioned?
I did not.
That's amazing.
That's good though. I like that.
It's not good. It's very not good though that you didn't know about it. Because I mean, it's been around for they did it over a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
Did you know that he passed the legislation also? It's called Right to Try, and he can, if there's drugs that haven't been FDA approved and somebody's going to die, they have the right to try a drug that has not been approved. And it's already saved lives.
About that, actually. That's good because, you know, why would you, like, if you got one shot, man, you got to take it, right?
I'm telling you.
Like,
I would.
Not only for the individual, but like, let's say you had some illness that was likely to kill you, and there was a new drug that could potentially save your life. Even if it doesn't, at least we know now that it didn't save your life. And the next person that's thinking about taking it, we have at least one study to point to. They're like, oh, well, Jim took it and it didn't really work for him, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Thing. And I think that the list probably could be 40 pages long of the things that the mainstream media and liberal outlets are concealing from a lot of Americans of a lot of good things that are happening.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a good transition to kind of like a different point that I want to make, because my beef with Trump, let's say, if you want to call it a beef, isn't like policy based. If anything, I've actually gotten more conservative over the past 3 years or so in terms of like policy pieces, but it's more like a character.
You're growing up.
that. Well, that's normal too, right? Wasn't the quote, if you're conservative when you're young, you're heartless, and if you're liberal when you're old, you're probably poor, or something like that. There's like some quote that which I think is probably partially true. But anyway, my beef with him is more like character based, you know? The policies are a separate issue, sort of. I feel like he doesn't have like the character that I want in a leader necessarily, you know? And that's not to say that I don't understand the appeal. Like you talked about, people were fed up. You know, if you don't like the way the table's set, flip it over. I understood the appeal, especially when he was running. And even when he ran, I was like, man, I got to hand it to the man. Like, what a hell of a campaign to kind of steal that one, you know? But again, it's more character based. So can I read you a couple quotes here to kind of illustrate my point?
Yes.
Okay, so, and you can debate whether he said this or not, but he was questioned about whether he said it, and he said it's probably true. So here's the quote. Black guys counting my money. I hate it. The only kind of people I want counting my money are short guys that wear yarmulkes every day. I think that the guy is lazy, and it's probably not his fault, because laziness is a trait in the blacks. It really is. I believe that. It's not anything they can control. Okay, so set that quote aside for a second, because that is whatever that is what it is. But the other quote I think is even more damaging, and something I even have a bigger problem with. And this is the quote: "I am the least racist person there is." Okay, so first of all, for someone to say I am the most or I am the least anything, like I'm the smartest or I'm the most powerful, like any statement like that communicates to me that it's strictly ego based. Like you're just saying whatever you need to say to protect your ego and to build yourself up into something, you know? And I understand the appeal to do that, and I think we all do that to some extent in certain situations, but that's not the kind of thing I want in a leader. You know, it's egotistical. Would you agree with that?
Sure. Yeah.
And then another one too here is, he's done so much for the VA, like we talked about. But then I think this is when he was running his campaign. It's another quote here. He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured. Okay, and like, I get he's like this business guy and he's trying to be like, but again, it's like, what are you trying to say, man? Like, what do you like? It's a character thing, you know?
Yeah.
And it seems like he's constantly saying things to protect his ego. He's constantly like saying things to build himself up and then backtrack them later. And maybe that's characteristic of a lot of politicians and a lot of business types. But it's kind of like this egotistical, very insensitive. A lot of feels like lies, and they're kind of like small things, you know. It's like he's lying about things that are like, why do you even got to lie about that, you know? And then kind of like the undertones of racism. And since I bring up racism, I want to get your reaction to this. I want to get your reaction to this thing that I heard, okay? Not all Trump supporters are racists, but all racists are Trump supporters. How would you react to that statement?
I think it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And I would argue that a lot of the race baiters on the TV that people can see, you know, Al Sharpton, Reverend Jackson, these kind of people, AOC, are racists themselves. There's a lot of racism flopping around. I think it just boils down to some people are assholes and some aren't. Mm-hmm. You know, we do not have lynchings going on. If we do have any, it's people lynching Trump supporters when they're walking into venues and stuff. There are nobody. You don't hear about that kind of stuff. You know,
right.
What we hear about are individual wackos, not some kind of movement that, oh man, the KKK's on the march, they're gonna kill everybody down in wherever. No, you never hear about that. You hear about a stupid white kid or whatever color kid coming up with a gun and shooting people. That's called crazy people. It's not systemic racism. I don't buy into the idea that the country's racist. Trump says something about not wanting black guys to count as money. You know, that's his choice. Is it sensitive? No. He's pretty blunt. We all knew that. We didn't vote for him for his table manners. And, you know, I understand how a lot of people, it drives them crazy. And like you just mentioned, you hate that. You don't like the character that way in your leader and all that. But, you know, I would just argue, you know, is it really that important? You know, is anything bad happening to you because of it? No. Is he passing a lot of things and doing a lot of good for the country? Yes. So I'd say the trade-off is pretty clear that I would rather have a guy who's a complete slob, foul-mouthed jerk doing good for the country than a slick, little nice, polite person who's ripping things apart.
Right.
Pretty simple. You know, his words don't impact you or me. What he said about the guy counting money does not impact you. It might offend you. You might think of it and go, Jesus, what is he talking about? But it does not really affect you. It really doesn't affect anybody. Right. It's just words. We had a saying when I was a kid called sticks and stones can break our bones, but words will never hurt us. And believe me, sure. You guys don't even know what it's like to live in a childhood where there really was bullies. They really did wait for you in the park walkway on the way home to kick your ass, and we really did tease the living shit out of people. It was a rough situation, but you know what? Out of it, people learned a lot of life lessons. You know, people learn to defend themselves. They learn to take criticism. There's a lot of things that get learned when it's a little bit of a rough situation. So it certainly doesn't bother me a bit. I love that the president tweets, and I hope he does it every hour. Because you know what it is? It's a direct line into what he's thinking about and what's going on, not filtered by the media, not filtered by handlers, not filtered by anybody. So I think that's a good thing. I like to know what's going on with the president rather than, you know, only hear somebody's point of view about it.
Yep. And I get it. I understand.
And, you know, you and me, we have friends who talk thousands of times worse than what have you ever heard from the president. We have friends, both of us do, who say much worse about people, whether it's against whoever. So just to be outraged because he says something is disingenuous to me, because we're friends intimately with people who are just like that or worse.
Right. And I think that's a good point. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to get your reaction to that not all Trump supporters are racist, but all racists are Trump supporters. As speaking from my own experience, there's a very strong correlation from my own experience here. Obviously, I don't know everyone in the whole United States, but the people who I knew 10 years ago that were calling Obama the N-word and were, using racist language in like a very hateful way are the same people who are very pro-Trump right now. So that's my own experience. And it's hard to argue that it's like a factor, And that's not to say that they're all racist. Anybody who likes Trump's racist. That's not what I'm saying. But there does appear to be a strong correlation there. And I think it makes sense. I mean, based on the way he talks and the way he behaves, I mean, he's kind of speaking to that group of people, and he's kind of giving them what they want. I think it's intentional. It might even be an act for all I know. He could be doing it just to kind of gain support from that crowd of people, but it does seem like he's got their support.
I think you're making more out of it. I just don't see the big racist movement behind the scenes. I don't know anybody who called Obama the N-word when he was in president. I mean, and I know a lot of people who really didn't like him at all and would have had a perfect opportunity to use that word and never did. Yep. I really don't. I think that it's you see more racism from working guys in the field, construction workers, and a large majority of those people are Democrats. So, I mean, I could say the exact opposite. And I also can say that I know a lot of people who are major Democrats who used to talk like that, and all of a sudden they don't anymore, because it's not in fashion anymore. And the Democrats are the inventors of the KKK. There was no flip that everybody likes to dream about. They are the same people. I forget. Robert Byrd was a Grand Ku Klux Klan King Poobah or whatever the hell their things are. And he was Hillary Clinton's mentor. She spoke about how wonderful he is. You want to go back to Margaret Sanger. The Democrats love Margaret Sanger. She was an insatiable racist with designs on wiping out black people. Okay. Why are Planned Parenthoods in every single black community? You never see one on my street. You don't see them in Beverly Hills. They're probably, over in Bloomfield Hills outside of Detroit. They are in the inner cities, and they are designed and targeting minorities.
Yeah.
And that's a Democrat thing. So there's a lot of racism. If we want to throw the racism word around freely, which I think is making it really lose its meaning, there's plenty of love to go all the way around.
Yeah. And I would also add that I believe things are on a spectrum, right? I think I listened to an evolutionary biologist on Joe Rogan talk about we have a mechanism in our brain built for things like racism. So it's like a natural human phenomenon to not trust the other and to it's a tribal thing, right? So it's like there's a certain part of it that's normal and natural. That doesn't make it good, and that doesn't make it right, and that doesn't mean what we should be doing. But it also there's some wiring within people that enables that sort of thought process, right? So I don't want to vilify anybody who's ever taken one medium-sized step down that thought process, but it's on a spectrum, right? It's like people who have had racist thoughts versus people who openly use the N-word and say hateful things and do hateful things and do violent things. So it's like, and not everyone's at that stage of violence, as you pointed out. Like, we're not actively killing people in the street. I mean, but, does that come into play when judges are handing down sentencing or when police are interacting with people,
Hey,
probably does.
That reminds me of another great thing that Trump's done that you might not have ever heard about. He's passed prison reform. I don't know the total ins and outs of it, and I'm not even sure I support it, but it is a prison reform package where people who are low offenders who, were caught up in like a 3 strikes you're out type of scheme, or in certain communities where, minorities are predominantly taken away for lesser crimes than others. He has passed legislation for it, and you can look it up and learn all the details. Like I said, I'm not sure that I agree with it, because I believe that when you break the law, you play, you pay kind of thing. So I don't know that why people get out early when they got in trouble. I'm sorry.
Right.
That's what the appeals process is for. But he did pass it. I think sort of a token. You'll find out that he is not a far right guy. I mean, if you really look into the things he's after, the things he wants to do, he is not far right. He infuriates the far right. He spends too much money on military. He doesn't get into all the wars that they want to get into. He is a friend of Israel in a real, meaningful way. He's not the friend of the right, trust me. He's in the middle. He's where you and I are. He's in the 60% where you and I sit, not in the extreme 30-30 on the outside. So I'm surprised that a lot more people haven't come around, to be honest with you. And it could be the fact that of the character thing you can't get over, or that you're just inundated with people telling you how bad it is, and you're afraid that your friends will beat you up if you say you like them.
I'm not. I mean, I think everyone's a little bit afraid of social consequences.
That's why the polls show that he loses and then he wins in landslides, because of people who won't say it, but they think it. And they get behind the little curtain in the voting booth. Hell yeah, I'm voting for Trump because I like money. I like having a job. I like black people having the lowest unemployment rates ever recorded. I like that Chinese and Mexicans both have the lowest unemployment rate ever recorded. Women's unemployment record is down to the 1950s. I mean, come on.
So what would you attribute that all to?
Well, a lot of things. The big things is all the different markets that have been opened up by deregulation. Those EPA regulations, dismantling EPA, well, a lot of those regulations hampered business from drilling offshore, from doing this, from building the pipeline, from mining coal in Virginia, from doing all these different things. And that's just the energy sector. There's plenty of other sectors. Fishing has been affected, many, many things. When you take those limitations off of companies and they can invest and they can do things that spur profits and capital, that puts people to work. And when people get put to work, it's a chain reaction throughout the country. And that's what's happening in a nutshell.
And you didn't mention taxes there, but is that something that you
taxes
feel
are was too? He drastically reduced the corporate tax rate. People say it's evil because corporations are evil, blah blah blah. Well, they're not. They're the people that put us to work. They're the people that build things and research things and put things together for us to make our lives better. Without them, we're going to live in teepees again with a campfire and causing a bunch of global warming from burning wood. So be thankful for the corporations, because they are what drives this country. And are some of them bad? Yes. But to the vast majority of them are companies like J. Rank Electric, as you mentioned, who are a family-owned business, who care about each and every one of their employees, who are tough customers. They demand excellence. We do the best we can. And in return, they pay us and pay us handsomely. So that's the way capitalism works. Separate individuals separately pursuing their own interests and willingly cooperating. You told me that you're a Milton Friedman fan. You ought to know all these things.
I had Milton Friedman on our list here. He was one of the things I was going to bring up next.
Yeah.
And the things that he said, when you kind of introduced me to him, I went down the Milton Friedman rabbit hole, whatever that was, like 4 years ago. And, he wasn't saying anything that I didn't already sort of maybe believe, but he was putting words to something that I kind of felt that I maybe never fully articulated. And like the things that he talks about are kind of the reason that I do see myself more fiscally concerned, because I do think that it comes down to individual responsibility and individual freedoms and all the things that he talks about, So I'm a fan of the things, his philosophy or his whatever you want to call it, his work that he's assembled.
That means that you're not a fan. That means that you're not a fan then of the government imposing a $15 minimum wage, because Milton Friedman is very much against it and blames well-intentioned rules by the government that destroy communities and lives and impose a generational poverty is what becomes and comes from a mandatory minimum wage.
Yep.
So you're against it, right? In front of all your friends, you hate the $15 minimum wage. You think they should take it away and make it zero, right?
Well, I want to do something else first, and we can come back to that. I saw, you know how people do the 10-year challenge on Facebook, where they show like a picture of themselves from 10 years ago and a picture of themselves today? Well, they did that with like the federal minimum wage, and it was like exactly the same, and I had to chuckle a little bit. I mean, it's kind of a funny thing. But I definitely see your point in what he's saying. Like, first of all, and we talked about this, and I might be just saying some of the things that you said to me previously, but if you set it too high, then isn't that just incentivizing things like automation and just not hiring people or just not doing business? I mean, there's a certain point where it's counterproductive, right?
Have you seen that they've added kiosks at all the McDonald's and Taco Bells? You go in, you can go to a computer screen and order your food now. Yeah, you know where that started? That started in Seattle.
With the yeah, because they had some sort of high minimum wage there, and that was basically it's right. I mean, to me, it's like it's clear. It's a clear progression of incentives, right? If you force a market to do something that it's not capable of doing or not ready to do, then you're going to create unintended consequences, which might be laying people off, right?
Yeah.
But it's back to the balance thing, right? It's like, what do we do about people who are working full time but don't have enough money to feed their family, so they're also on welfare? So in effect, we're almost subsidizing some of these mega corporations by paying their welfare, for their employees. Like, I don't know what the solution is, but it's kind of a pickle that we're in, right? Paying wages that you can't live on, And I think one of the arguments that you made is like a job at McDonald's isn't supposed to be for a 40-year-old person with a family. Like, that's not where they're supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
What if that's where they're at? Like, I don't know. It's tricky.
Well, we all are not guaranteed equal outcomes in life.
Ooh, equal opportunity and equal outcome. That's something that I'm very passionate about. Learned a lot about that while I was on the trail. So equality.
See, Jordan, I've been both. I've had a time in my life, Jordan, where people that couldn't stand me bought my groceries because they were worried I was going to die, because I had no money. I had nothing. I had no car. I had no clothes. Didn't have a way to wash myself. Didn't have nothing. I spent years that way without anything, similar to hiking the Appalachian Trail, except I was down here on Earth. And I pulled myself out of that. The only way I was going to get out of it was to do it myself, and I realized that at some point and did it. So I don't have a heck of a lot of sympathy for people who don't work for the things they want.
Yeah, I understand. So let's come back to equality for a second, because it's kind of like the new thing here. It's like equality. We want equality. I'm not sure it's even a good goal. Why would you want to be equal to anybody, right? I mean, like, you and I aren't equal exactly. Like, we might be 1A and 1B, but like, we're not equal at all. I mean, you are older than me. You're far more handsome than I am.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
You probably have more money in the bank, but maybe I'm more intellectual, maybe I'm funnier, maybe I have, who knows, but we're not equal.
You got better hair.
Definitely have better hair,
I'll give you that.
And not only are we not equal, I'm not sure I would want to be equal. Like, you're you do your things and I do my things, and you have your favorite bands and they're your favorite bands for some reason. Like, not all bands are equally your favorite. If you were to make like a list of your top 10, we know, like, I could probably say that, like, I don't know, Miley Cyrus probably isn't making the cut, and like, to people to be for equality, it's almost like if you were to, let's say Led Zeppelin was doing a reunion tour, and you bought a ticket, $10,000. You spent $10,000 on a Led Zeppelin ticket, and you're pumped, and you show up for the show, and they pull a switcheroo, and it's like it's a Hanson reunion tour instead. Sorry, but you don't get a refund. You know,
Yeah.
well, they're equal, aren't they? I mean, Hanson and Led Zeppelin are equal, aren't they? I mean, everybody's equal, right? It's like,
Sure.
no, we're not equal. It's insane. It's like actually insane that people think that people are equal. I mean, but there's a difference, right? Because I think we want a fair game and we want equal opportunity, you know? Because
Do
if it's
we
not
want it fair? Why do we want it fair? What kind of fair? Fair as in all the rules apply to everybody equally? Or fair that if somebody's disadvantaged, we're going to give them a little help so that they can be equal, fair on a level playing field with somebody else?
That's a good question. So it's tricky. I kind of think a lot in like terms of like strategy and game, like kind of game theory. My brain works a lot in that way. And you kind of think of like a board game. Like when you start a board game, everyone's at the same spot in the game, right? But they all make different decisions as the game progresses and end up somebody's the winner and somebody's the loser, and there's a lot of people in between, you know? So I think it's part of our responsibility in shaping our government to create a fair game. And by a fair game, I mean one that everybody has a chance to win and that nobody is like obviously disadvantaged from the get-go in their game, you know? Like here's an example of like something like to me it's unfair that certain public schools are complete trash and have the worst teachers and never get a chance, and then other public schools are way better and they bring up like something about that's not fair. Now that doesn't mean the solution is bring everybody down to the lowest level and that way everyone's equal. Like that's not the solution, right? But there's something I think that's important at creating a fair game, equal opportunity. We're never going to have equal outcome. It's a ridiculous goal, I think, you know, and it's not only is it ridiculous, I think it's toxic and ineffective and destructive, really, you know, because ultimately you just end up envious, and that's even more destructive.
Well,
Go ahead.
you know who has the lowest equal opportunity out of everybody in our society? You're going to say some minority. No, it isn't. It's poor white people. Because poor white people are the same poverty as any inner city black person or wherever, except they don't have any sort of affirmative action stuff to help them get into some college somewhere. So they have it the worst. And I think that that's not fair. I think if they're going to let anybody fall through the cracks that way, then it should be across the board. And I don't support affirmative action in any way, shape, or form.
Right. And I think your boy Milton Friedman would agree. I think he would probably argue that it creates kind of arbitrary thresholds in a market that doesn't need any arbitrary intervention. You know,
listen, when you're going to go hire somebody to help you remodel your dad's house there, are you going to pick that person because of what color their friggin' skin is, or are you going to pick it because they have a skill to offer?
Yep, I understand. So can we look at the other side of this too? Because I think back to talk of cumulative truth, right? It's like affirmative action, giving two people who are equal on paper, giving one the advantage because of their skin color. I think is probably not. It's not a fair game. Right?
It's a racist.
Right.
It's racist.
It's effectively like a reverse racism, which is racism. You know, I think that's probably true. However, I think we also have to recognize the situation that these people are in and how they got there, you know? And I don't know what the solution is, right? But it's probably not do nothing. And, you know, or maybe it is. I don't know. What do you think? How do we account for
How do you do it is you really do strive for equal opportunity. And that means nobody gets any extra. Nobody gets any advantage over anybody else. You do it by your merit. And unfortunately, the reality of it is some people aren't as smart as other people. Some people aren't as driven as other people. Some people don't, have designs on moving ahead in life in a certain way where other people do. It's up to your individual self what you do. You want to keep your fingers crossed before you're born that you get born to good parents. If you don't, you know what? That's a hard life thing that happens to people, and there's nothing around it. Nothing that you can do about it. No legislation you can pass, no money you can throw at it to change that. So the best thing to do is to err on the side of equal opportunity across the board. Nobody gets extra. No certain countries get favoritism to immigrate here legally over others. It's based on merit. And individually, you're based on your merit. You are where you are right now because of the actions and the choices you've made in your life. The same thing for me, same thing for everybody. And I don't think that somebody's skin color should even be remotely considered when you're thinking about who should get this and who should get that, because it makes absolutely no difference. Because I am not racist. I do not care what color somebody's skin is. Somebody can be white, brown, yellow. One could be an asshole. One could be a nice guy. It's an individual thing. And the sooner we all understand that, the better. And to hire based on diversity of skin color, based on and not diversity of character, is a pretty shameful way to go. And that is the inherent racism in this country, if there is any.
Well, it reminds me of the quote you said before about the road to hell paved with good intentions. Like, clearly that policy was created with good intentions, right? They see these communities of people as having real disadvantages, and they're trying to just give them one little nugget to give them an extra chance, almost, and yeah. It's well intentioned. Whether it's effective or creating other problems, like we talked about, your policy implementation creates 10 other side effects that are unaccounted for. I think that's probably true, and I don't know how to account for it, but I agree that we should be trying to create a fair game, equal opportunity.
Well, if we don't make it fair, if we don't make it equal across the board, there's going to be people who have a problem with other people, because you're giving somebody something that other people can't have based on skin color. So you are now separating, by doing that, you are separating races and causing a division that wouldn't normally be there.
Yep. And I've seen studies, or at least heard it talked about, that it actually serves as like a counterproductive measure ultimately, because you might have a black person who got a job based purely on merit. Like, he was the right person for the job. He was an excellent candidate, and I hired him. And then you have people within the organization now that think that it was some form of affirmative action that got him in that place. And it kind of like, it's actually a seed of racism that grows more racism, effectively, So yeah, it's a mess, isn't it?
Well, I know a lot of black people who are intellectually honest about it and are against affirmative action. They don't want it. They are completely aware of the fact that there's nobody alive today who held slaves. There's nobody alive today who was a slave.
Well, that's not entirely true. There are still slaves in the world, and there are people still who own slaves.
I'm talking about,
I see your point. Historically, America, yes.
And the problem with the whole thing is if we're going to do the affirmative action, then there's a lot of groups out there who have been, crapped on over the eons of time, who probably feel they are owed something. I've got a lot of Irish blood in me. There were more Irish slaves in this country than there were African slaves, but they called it, really, and they were called indentured servants, so that it wasn't slavery. But yeah, look it up. By far more Irish slavery in this country than there ever was African slavery. And the African slavery, if we want to get to the heart of it, were black people sold by other black people to white people. So
So, we've created all these problems in our past, right? By bringing slaves to this country and then setting them free, and not necessarily giving them equal rights right away and having them go through that process, right? So, is there anything left to still be done? Like, do you see it as a fair game right now? Is there any adjustments that you think should or could be done, or you think better left untouched? And
I think that all the affirmative action measures all need to be removed. I think that's the only way to go forward and to unite people, to be honest with you, because it's an unfair system. It's just wrong. Why would a college not take a smarter Chinese person because there was a poor black skinned person who could get in there? It doesn't make any sense at all, because there's been a lot of Chinese or Japanese, Oriental, Asian discrimination where they're not letting them in because they are by far smarter, and that's our fault. But they're not letting them in to let other people in, and they earned it, so it's not fair.
Right. Yep, I'm familiar with some of that. It's an interesting problem we've gotten ourselves into, and it's like the more you keep digging, the further you end up in like a situation that's like, I don't know, what are you supposed to do now?
Hey, People are not going to like certain other people. You can name it racism, you can name it whatever you want, but do we as individuals have the right not to like somebody? When Trump criticized Elijah Cummings about Baltimore being a big shithole, and Elijah Cummings is in charge of that area, why was everybody was outraged that Trump would criticize a black man? Is that seriously where we want to go? Is somebody above criticism because of the color of their skin? I don't think so.
Right. Yep. And I think that's hits like kind of a broader point of like inner cities or even like poor rural communities that are like basically living in poverty, man. And it's like, I don't know what to do. Like it seems like a cultural problem, really. Like what kind of culture like perpetuates families with and like, no role models and drug abuse and like it seems like it's a cultural problem. Like Trump's not doing that. That's something embedded in the culture that we needed to take a long hard look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves why are we doing this to ourselves and what can we do about it? How do we change all that? It's hard.
It's going to be very difficult, and I'm not religious. But you can put the graphs up next to each other at the decline of civilization in this country, and the decline of religion, and they're exactly diametrically opposed.
This is perfect. This is a perfect transition. We can get off the race stuff and start talking about some religious things. And because I mean, most of my life I wasn't religious. I can kind of define myself loosely as atheist or agnostic or whatever you want to call it. But over the past few years, I've been looking at some of these religious stories, mostly thanks to Dr. Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Jordan Peterson, but studying his work, like for real, changed my life, like in a way that I never even thought was possible. And it has exactly what to do with what you're talking about. These religious ideas, once we became so hyper rational, we've dismissed everything, like for example, like clearly Jesus didn't die and rose from the dead. Like that's obviously bullshit. And anybody who thinks that's stupid, right? That's only if you look at it literally, look at the story literally, then that's probably didn't happen that way. But if you look at it more symbolically and like almost like literature and like what it's trying to teach us from that perspective, really what they're trying to say is the hero is reborn. Like when the hero lays himself on the line and dies for truth and love, then somebody fills that void. Like that spirit. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's like when Darth Vader killed Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan got stronger. Huh? When the Romans killed Jesus or Christ, Christianity took off. He was the martyr.
Right. Yep, it was just like we were talking about before. Of like you do something with good intentions and it completely backfires. They think, oh yeah, this guy Jesus, he's a pain in the ass. We're gonna get rid of him. That'll be the end of him. Nope, that didn't work. You know, and I don't necessarily take any of these things literally. I mean, you can look at the story of like Noah, for example. Like, do I believe that like a flood flooded the whole world and like this guy put a bunch of animals on the ark? Like, probably not. Like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But if that's what you're focused on, you're missing the point of the story entirely. Like, the point of the story is like the flood's coming, man. Things are gonna get worse, and if you don't prepare for them, like not only are you gonna die, your family's gonna suffer, and it's not gonna work out for you. You need to make the proper sacrifices in order to be prepared for when things turn bad. God, you were going to ask something or say something.
Oh, yeah, I was going to mention that the story of Noah actually was stolen from the ancient Sumerians.
I know
that was not a Christian or a Jew story. That was from the ancient Sumerians, and the ancient Sumerians were actually alive and had civilizations in the 9 to 13,000 year ago mark, which there was a cataclysmic event of an asteroid hitting the Earth and causing humongous tsunamis that took out a lot of things and rose the sea levels by about 133 feet. So that is a very actually true story. It was just copped by the Christians or the Jews or whoever wrote the Bible.
Yeah, the Jews. Yep. But again, like the factual elements of that story are sort of irrelevant. Like, it's not what's important to me, right? What's important is like what they're trying to tell you. You know what I'm saying? And what they're trying to tell you is like let me think of an example here. Like that's like more modern day. Like if you looked at your bank account, let's say you had $100,000 in the bank, let's just say, for example.
Woo!
And you say, well, I got $1,000 in the bank. Like I might as well go on vacation. I might as well go to Vegas. I might as well do this, do that, whatever, right? And then you come back and now you only have $10,000 in the bank, you know? But then the flood comes. Like maybe it's like a real flood, like your house gets flooded, or maybe your kid gets sick, or maybe you got to take time off work because something, you know? And now it's like, oh, I really wish I would have had that $10,000 or that $100,000 now, you know? And it's like, but you didn't sacrifice when you could have, you know? So now you got to deal with the consequences. The flood comes and you're not prepared because you weren't perfect in your generations, as it says in the Bible, you know?
Oh, it's the
I think that's like so powerful for me. Yeah, yes, the old ant grasshopper, exactly. Same thing. And like who takes that story literally? Like, no, the ant wasn't really talking to the grasshopper. That's not literally what happened. Like, it's a story. It's supposed to teach you, you know? And I think the one that was, of all the kind of the biblical stories, the one that I first kind of grasped onto that was like super meaningful to me and like really helped me like look at these things differently was the Cain and Abel story, you know? Because I felt that, man. I felt like envious of my fellow man. I looked at somebody who was succeeding or was doing something that I wanted to do, and I felt like hatred towards them, or I felt like I deserved that and they didn't, you know? And it's like, what happens when you walk down that path, you know? Become hateful towards your fellow man who's doing what you want to do, right? It's not useful because not only now do I have all this hate and resentment for this other person, but like they're doing what I want to do. So I hate somebody who's doing what I want to do. So I end up hating myself, you know? And it's like, instead you got to look at yourself and like, look at your own sacrifices that you're making and change your own behavior, you know?
Yeah. That's
and
why
find a way to.
That's why it's a pretty wrong deal to be jealous and hateful of millionaires and billionaires. Sorry, some people made it better. I do not hate millionaires and billionaires. My hat's off to them. I'd like to be a millionaire or a billionaire. It'd be great.
I know. I would.
Man, imagine all the good things we could do with $1 million or $1 billion, right, Jordan?
I know. I could do a lot with it.
So I do not.
I got a $10 million goal for this fundraiser.
And yeah. And if if CEOs get paid trillions of dollars in bonuses and everything, more power to them. If that's what the company wants to do with their money and not invest it in their workforce, and then their good workers go to some company that does want to invest in their workforce, that's their problem. And that's how capitalistic societies work.
Yeah. I'm having a gentleman on Thursday on the podcast, and I see him often criticizing billionaires and things. So we're going to get into that on Thursday, hopefully. But I definitely see your point, you know. Ultimately, it's hatred for the successful, and it doesn't lead you to a good place, you know. But there's also another side of it too. Like for example, when they had the government bailouts there, and they handed these CEOs these millions of dollars or whatever during these bailouts, like that's not cool either. You know, that was our money. They took that from us.
I don't agree with bailouts in any way, shape, or form. I think they should have let all of them fail.
Yep. I figured you would say that. And maybe you're right. I mean, I don't know.
Those bailouts contradicted actual free market movements. The free market is there to protect consumers. And when the government comes in and says, oh, you guys did a whole bunch of horrible toxic loans, here, let's give you some money so that it doesn't hurt you as bad. Now, where's the incentive for them to not do toxic loans anymore? I don't see any, because they'll just get another bailout next time. Where is the incentive for the car companies who agree to these ridiculously ever-increasing union deals, and their cars become so expensive they can't sell them, and then they get bailed out by the government, and they keep doing the same thing. It doesn't make any sense. They should have went bankrupt.
Yeah, it's kind of a vicious cycle of perpetuating a system that's not working.
That's what you get from lobbyists.
Probably agree. So I want to back up to a question that you asked me, because I actually want to ask it back to you. I mentioned you tend to the garden and the places you can reach, and you said, your next door neighbor lets their garden grow impotent with weeds. What would you do? Because I want to ask you, what would you do? I mean, you're kind of, I mean, I don't want to paint you as like just a libertarian, but you're sort of libertarian-ish, right? And like,
Yeah.
how do you address that situation?
As long as what he's doing on his yard doesn't impact me, I could care less what he does.
But let's say it is. Let's say he's letting his weeds grow. The seed
If it's
weeds
infringing on my rights, if he's infringing on my rights somehow, or causing hazards to me, then I'm going to have a problem with it. I'm going to have to do something about it. What I do about it depends on what it is. If he's doing something that's, feeding antifreeze to my dog or something, then I'm going to kill him. If he's just letting dandelions get out of control and the seeds are blown into my yard, I'll probably ask him to take care of it. But there's nothing I can do about something like that.
Right. Well, the reason I wanted to ask that question is
I put up a fence, a big wall.
And Mexico's going to pay for it.
No, I'll pay for it.
No, you're gonna pay for it. All right, never mind. So when you asked me that question, I really thought about it, and because I was also bringing up to you like truth and love, right? And essentially that's Christian doctrine. That's basically like symbolic of what Christ was about, truth and love, right? Yeah. And next to the Cain and Abel story, I think the next most impactful piece of all that for me was the simple question, what would Jesus do? I think that's a really, really good question to ask ourselves when we're in tricky situations, So what would he do, So if I really ask myself and think about that, let's say I have a neighbor, I have a nice garden, and my neighbor's letting his weeds go crazy, and the weeds are putting weed seeds into my yard, in my garden, and it's messing everything up. Well, now I got to address the situation, right? But I have to do it with truth and love, or else it's not going to work, Because one of the things I said to you is like having like hate and building hate for your neighbor and like cursing them and muttering under your breath and like having this like tension between you guys forever. That's not a good solution. It's not really that's not going to do you any favors. You got to carry that around with you all the time. It's like stress, So instead you do the really difficult thing and you go over and you maybe have a conversation with them. You say, hey, friend, I noticed like your yard's kind of going a little crazy here. And, I'm wondering if you can kind of start working on it a little bit. It's kind of messing up my deal over here. And I don't know if you're going through a hard time or maybe if you need some help with it or whatever, but like, let me know what you need. I'm here for you. Like, I don't know, you'd approach it in a way that you spoke your truth. It's like, this is a problem for me. You're creating a problem for me. And that's true, but it's also wrapped in love. Like, I care about you, buddy. I want to make sure you're doing good.
What happens when he tells you to take a leap?
Yeah. Right. That's a good question. What would Jesus do?
He'd probably live with the weeds. Or maybe he'd move. I have no idea.
And like,
maybe he'd have Mary Magdalene come over and rub his feet or something. I don't know.
Right. And like, you can replace Jesus with something else. Like, what would the best person do? What would the person who we admire most do? They probably wouldn't give up. They probably wouldn't move. Maybe they take the burden on themselves and they take care of it themselves. Maybe I don't know. I'm not sure, but that's what we have to try to do. Whatever he would do in that situation, whatever the best person would do, that's what we're supposed to be trying to do. And I think that simple idea has completely changed my life, And like, I don't take it literally.
The best person can come to an impasse with somebody, and that other person who's bothering you could just flat out say, no, I'm not doing it. And if you touch the weeds in my yard, I'll shoot you. That's what they could do. And it could come to that. So what do you do then? There's nothing you can do. Short of becoming violent with the person or having burning his house down or who knows what you can do. But if that guy isn't going to do it, there's nothing you can do.
Yeah. And you're right, and I think part of
what you got to remember there is in most communities there would be a law against letting your yard get to that way to where it would impact other people. So
right. And that connects with what you were saying before about this, like, it seems like things have gotten further away we've gotten from religion, right? And like, I think there's some truth in that because ultimately government was created from religion, Like the concept that we all have individual rights, and we all have something valuable within us that deserves respect. That's like a religious idea that was implemented into law. Like the religious idea came first, you know? Like the 10 Commandments, for example, they're sort of like the first laws, effectively. Maybe not the first laws, but like close to it anyway, which emerged from religious ideas, you know? So it's like we've tried to separate church and state when like really it's almost like we need to be doing the opposite. Like there's a strong line there between like forcing religion on people. Like I'm not trying to say we should do that, but like ultimately our policies and our laws should be coming from deep religious ideas about like loving each other and like trying to do good and like, you know, and it seems like it's being counterproductive, you know. But again, that law that you're talking about of like not letting your neighbor do that, it's effectively like, yes, you're protecting the rights of individuals, which is fundamentally a religious, at least originally a religious idea.
Yeah.
And then
with you. But the only thing I would argue about is I very much believe that that the original societies, the original civilizations, congregations of humans, was in the Sumerian area, and those laws all came, and all of the things we think really did start with them, and the Jews and all the other religions to follow stole from them the ideas. So and their laws were based on religion, but in a kind of different way. They weren't. Their religions weren't myths; they were real, and to them, and their laws were based around it. So.
Sumeria, that's like ancient Mesopotamia, effectively, right?
Yeah, even earlier in the Mesopotamia, but yeah, same area.
So one of the Mesopotamian gods, and actually he was elected top gods by all the gods, was Marduk. And I learned about this from studying Dr. Jordan B. Peterson's work. And the characteristics of Marduk, well, there's lots of characteristics, but the top two things is he has eyes all the way around his head, and he speaks magic words, right? So looking at this from like a literal perspective, like any modern person would say that's ridiculous. Like that's obviously not true. No person has eyes all the way around their heads, and there's no such thing as magic words, right? But if you look at it instead from like a symbolic or like a dramatic perspective, really what they're trying to tell you is pay attention, you know? Use your eyes and like look at the world and observe the world and then speak to transform the world, you know? And one of their first laws that they had was basically like the pharaoh or the king or whatever you want to call him was basically he was supposed to be trying to be Marduk. He was supposed to be trying to pay attention and speak magic words and like do kind of like act out Marduk. Like we're supposed to be acting out Christ effectively, you know? He's kind of like a precursor and like a more dramatic form. And one of the things that they would do is once a year they would bring the emperor outside the city and they take all of his king attire off of him and they would make him tell them all the ways that year that he wasn't a good Marduk, that he didn't do a good job, almost like a confession of his sins. You know, it was kind of like a way to kind of reset and you know, recognize his failures and maybe learn from them, you know, and have a sense of humility and kind of build that into his character, you know. And I'm not saying we should take Trump out and make him naked and make him confess all the ways that he wasn't a good Marduk, but it might work. It might work.
I think he would find some egotistical way to make it benefit him.
I know he would. But it's interesting too. We've talked about Star Wars a little bit in a couple of the messages we exchanged, and you brought it up here again too. And you made the Obi-Wan reference, and I kind of joked that I think I'm kind of a little bit more of an Anakin, you know, personally. I identify with that a little bit more. And like the scene that I always think about whenever I think about Star Wars is in episode 3, like the end of episode 3 when he has the fight with Obi-Wan and they're on like the lava planet or whatever, and Obi-Wan defeats him and he's like crawling in the dirt screaming at Obi-Wan like, I hate you. Like that's what we could become. Like I could be that person, and I know like how close I am to being filled with hate and envy and anger, you know. And I got to be really careful in life to not be that. And instead, You know, take a deep breath. Understand that you're not going to be able to protect your loved ones forever. You know, you're going to have to give some things up, and if you're willing to give it up, maybe you don't have to. You know, but because he wasn't willing to give it up, it was all taken from him in the end. You know, and I think these stories, whether it's Star Wars or Harry Potter or you know the Avengers series, like it's all effectively it's like religious undertones or religious kind of themes built into these modern day stories, and I think that's why they're so popular. You know, we've like moved away from like your typical religious stories, but we've adopted these other ones that are kind of filling the same void of like meaning and purpose and like and what you're supposed to do. You know,
Why do you suppose the left
bringing balance to the force.
Why do you suppose the left vilifies Christians and stuff so much? Why are they seemingly so scared of Christians?
Wait, I missed that. You broke up a little bit. Repeat that again.
I'm curious of why the left vilifies Christianity. Why they're so scared of Christian type religions, but yet they have some sort of secret love affair with religions that throw gay people off of roofs and dominate their women.
Yeah.
And tramps across the country cutting people's heads off too. Forgot about that.
Yeah. I want to put the Islam thing aside for a second. I think it's like a little bit too heavy to get into right now, and I don't feel educated enough to really get into it. But let's just address the first part of your question first, right? Like people who tend to be liberal tend to also be like
atheists,
more intellectual, you know? Right. And this hyper intellectuality is related to atheism because if you're intellectual, it's easy to dismiss these religious myths as like simply not true, and anybody who believes that is clearly an idiot, you know? And it's kind of a trap that you fall into because you dismiss it so quickly because you're so smart that you fail to extract out the meaningful pieces, you know? And then they see these people, let's say they're on the right, or maybe they're not on the right, but they are more religious, and they see them as stupid for believing these things, you know? And maybe they are, especially if they're taking them literally. Maybe they are stupid. I don't know. But I think that's like at least part of the beef is like they feel like all this is like outdated and stupid. And I would argue that it's probably the biggest misunderstanding of the modern era is religion itself. Whether you are on the extreme literal side of things, that you literally think that Noah had an ark, and you literally think that Moses talked to God and was given the 10 Commandments, and you literally think that Jesus rose from the dead, or on the other side that it's all completely, there's no value to be extracted from it whatsoever. It's all folklore, fairy tale, nothing valuable, you know? They're both wrong, in my opinion. And and maybe that's part of what I'm trying to do here is to, like, the people who are atheists or agnostic, maybe the way that I've learned about this will help them learn too and help them find meaning and purpose. And
I just don't understand how it bothers them so much. I don't understand what Christians even do that would be, you know, besides being stupid, like you said, they think, or whatever. What is it that angers them so much? I mean, what are Christian people even doing besides driving stupid on the way to church on Sundays?
Yeah. So I can give an example of something I dealt with the other day. Actually, I didn't deal with it. It was actually my fiance who dealt with it. And actually, we're going to come back to this, but I wanted to give a shout out to your wife, Amy. Aren't wives the best, man? Your wife is A+. She helps with everything. She rocks, man. And my future wife, she's pretty awesome too, man. It's really great to have a partner that just makes life better. It's really awesome. But anyway, so back to like the anger.
Jordan, you got to have a wife that's willing to hike naked.
Yes. Exactly. Dude, she's a home run. I'm so grateful and so lucky to have her, you know? Okay, so here's I think the anger, where it comes from. She had a conversation with somebody the other day at the YMCA, and it was like a good conversation. Everything's good. They're talking about life there. And then she tells this woman that, you know, we're engaged and that we live together, you know? And then she immediately basically attacks her and says that, you know, you're the devil's inside you and you're going to hell and all this. And it's like, I get it, lady. Like, I get it. You have these fundamental things built inside you, and it's like, we're crossing the line and you're now attacking us. And it's like, that's, I think, an example of where the anger comes from. You know, it's like judgmental. It's like the dogma of the religion has made them very judgmental and kind of believing that their way is the only way. And it's like really rigid, you know? And something I got the opportunity to think about in the trail is like the difference between like religion or like someone who's religious and someone who's spiritual, and like the dangers and like the benefits of each, you know? And it feels like the dangers of being like spiritual is like too much chaos, like not enough, like there's no guidance almost. There's no like path forward. There's not enough like substance. So you end up very airy. You end up very all over the place. You end up very like chaotic. If you go too far down it, or if you end up on the maybe like the toxic side of spirituality, right? But then you also have the dangers of religion of like too much order, too much dogma, too many rules, too much rigidity, you know? And that's not good either. You know, we need to be living in this constant balance between order and chaos, and like figuring out a way to like deal with the ever-changing dynamic, but also like carrying forward tradition of things that work and things that are good for families and good for, you know, future generations. And, you know, so it's like trying to strike that balance is tricky, especially in the modern era.
It's darn near impossible. I think the only way we're going to get out of any of this crap is to be individuals, judge each other as individuals, quit stereotyping, quit electing officials who separate us, quit allowing this government we have now that's supposed to work for us, constantly working to divide us. And that's what they're doing. You hear them all on both sides are telling each other to not like the other person. And it's wrong. And like I told you earlier, people that are on your side of the aisle and further left and me and further right, we have more things in common that we can agree upon than we have that we can disagree upon. And the longer we focus on the things that divide us that we'll never agree upon, the longer it's going to take to close this down. So what we need to do is all be equal, get rid of all the affirmative action, all be equal, get rid of the parties, all be equal, not allow corporate lobbyists to invade and infiltrate and corrupt our government, all be equal where laws pertain to the smallest and the greatest of us, all be equal to go after the opportunities we want to go after. And until we do all those things and quit dividing each other and picking teams, it's never going to change. We need to divide ourselves when it comes to sport teams or something. You know, you got the Lions fans against, what was it, Giants you were into?
That's right.
So both our teams suck, so it doesn't matter. Yeah. But we can divide each other on our sporting events and things. We don't need to divide ourselves on the fundamental things that make us humans and make us Americans. And it's really going to have a big problem. And it's either going to get better or we're going to fall into ultimate chaos, and it's going to, collapse society. There's going to be violence and bloodshed and death. And then we have no way of controlling who takes over in the aftermath of something like that.
Yeah. And it's a constant cycle of order and chaos and things getting better and things getting worse, and that's one of the things I want to do here with this movement is figure out a way to make it better. There's a lot of the main theme with this whole movement that I'm trying to make is like there's a lot of obstacles in the way of like getting where we want to be. Like, what if they weren't there? Like, what if we had creative control over our democracy and we could reshape some of the elements? Like, what would we do? How would we do it? And I really want to have give people a platform to express those ideas, see if we can come up with solutions that would work better, rather than this divisive. The first step
to that is focusing on things we all agree on. The 3 things you said you agree on with Trump, that would be the first things we could start on. Things that we all agree upon. We all agree that soldiers should be taken care of. Let's agree on it. Let's get it done. We all agree that there should be free trade. Let's get it done. We all agree that our country shouldn't be manipulated and taken advantage of by other countries. So let's move from there. We all agree that people shouldn't be homeless and living in the street and dying. Let's start there. We all agree that opioid crisis is bad. Focus on those things. Don't focus on changing or updating things that we'll never agree on, because it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Or we have
But
to
it's
compromise and truly compromise on certain things. Compromise.
Right.
We don't make it illegal to get an abortion, but we're no longer going to fund it with taxpayer money. That's the compromise. You want to do it, it won't be illegal, but you're going to pay for it yourself or get somebody to do it for free or whatever your problem is. But it's not going to be by the by other taxpayers.
Right.
We've had that discussion before too, and yeah, do
Well,
we want to
I want-
subsidize abortions, or do we want to subsidize welfare for the families of the kids who are born that weren't really wanted? And I told you that I was happy to subsidize living people than to subsidize killing them.
Yeah, and it comes back to the road to hell paved with good intentions piece too, because I think there's some unintended consequences here. And one example of it is, I think this was in Canada in particular, where a lot of Asian families who place a really higher value on male children were effectively mass aborting female children, female fetuses. So we create this law to give women kind of rights over their own reproduction, but it leads to a mass genocide of women. It's like,
dude, I got a problem with that too, man. The choice over their reproduction happens when they take their pants off, take their underwear off, and spread their legs and allow a man to insert his penis into her vagina enough times that he comes inside of her and makes a baby. All right.
Right.
That was where the choice was. The choice is no longer. The choice is no longer valid after there's a baby growing in there. Sorry to say, that is not her body anymore. The choice had already been made. So I definitely don't agree with, and I'm almost, it's kind of disgusting to me to think about somebody saying that it's a right over some of their own body to kill the other body that's in them that they chose to put. So
I understand. And not to keep bringing up Dr. Jordan Peterson, but he's had such a profound impact on my life that every time something comes up, I can't help but think about some of the things I learned from him, because he was asked about abortion, and I think his answer is the closest to how I feel. I think he articulated how I feel. Is like, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, and he might have elaborated on it further, but I think the premise of his idea was like, it's too late. You're asking the wrong question. Like whether or not abortion should be allowed, it's like it's the wrong question. Like the problem's already there, like the problem's deeper. It's like really we need to be asking is like you're saying, like how do we view our relationships with people of the opposite sex? Do we view them as something that's like to be thrown away and not cared about, or do we view them as something that's like sacred and holy and like important, And I think that's really the problem. Is it's more of like a cultural issue that I'm guilty of this too, man. I'm not, I'm lucky that I wasn't in a situation where I impregnated some girl that I wasn't, ready to deal with or wanting to deal with or whatever. I'm fortunate that I didn't fall into something like that. And now I'm going to, engaged and looking forward to having kids in the future and all that, Another thing he said is like whether you think abortion's good or bad, whatever, you wouldn't recommend that someone you love get one. It's like it's such a traumatic experience and I don't know. But on the other hand, I also don't want to take that away from somebody either. I'm back to almost like your individual liberty thing. It's not my deal, It's like it's maybe I just I almost hear this is how I'll put it. As where I sit right now, I am conflicted on the issue, but I still put my trust in the mothers to make the decision. That whatever they're gonna do, they're the one that has to deal with it. They're the one that has to make the decision. I just trust them to make the decision, hopefully with love and for their best interest of themselves and their future family. And hopefully that's what they're doing. And if it's not, it's a really, really sad thing, But that's right now. That's where I had to put my trust in females to be responsible for that.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that as long as I don't get to pay for it.
Yeah, I understand.
Oh, what about if somebody has a dog that shits in the living room every day, and they decide to take it out back and hit it in the head with a baseball bat till it's dead? Is that wrong too then?
I'm not sure how that transitioned there, but
I mean, you're killing a life,
right?
Because you don't want it,
right?
It's inconvenient to you. because you made a poor choice and got it, and now you don't want it anymore.
Again, it comes back to competing values. It's like, what do you value more? Do you value the life of the dog, or do you value the life of do you value the decision of the owner of the dog? You know, the person that's responsible for the dog. Like, is it their individual liberty that trumps the right of the dog, or is it the dog's life that trumps their? I don't know, but that's ultimately what it comes down to. Is these are competing forces, right? Yeah. I don't know what the answer is.
My answer is I don't care what people do.
I remember
they want to get abortions. Get an abortion every other week.
Yeah, I don't care if you marry your vacuum cleaner. I think is what he told me, or your lawnmower.
I really don't. I don't care if the guy kills his dog. I don't care if a chick aborts her baby. It doesn't matter to me. I don't want it around my life. I don't sanction it. I don't condone it. I don't think it's a good idea. But it's not my choice to tell somebody else what to do. But until it infringes on my rights. If it doesn't infringe on my rights, I don't care. So if I don't have to pay for somebody to get an abortion or come out of my paycheck in increments every week, then I don't care. Go ahead. Have as many abortions as you want. Go for it. But I don't want it impacting my life or infringing on my rights.
I understand. I respect that. Makes sense. All right, so we're getting close to 2 hours here. I'll give you one last question, and then we can wrap it up. Of all of the other presidential candidates that are coming out right now, are there any that you would actually maybe would like to see, or ones that you really, really don't like and you really hope kind of lose favor from the Democrats?
Well, it's a tough question because I'm not at all aligned with the Democratic philosophy.
So you don't like any of them?
I wouldn't vote for any of them. Sure. The one that I find the least objectionable would be Tulsi Gabbard. But I would say every last other one of them are wacko. Like wacko with a capital W.
So you think Trump's going to win that? You're going to bet another?
Yeah.
You're going to offer another?
I'll bet you $1 million this time.
I don't have $1 million, so I think I have to pass on that bet. I'm not going to bet anyway. I mean,
I will bet you an all expenses paid trip to Disneyland.
Wow. I'm going to pass.
Okay. He's going to win in a bigger electoral landslide than he already did last time, and he's going to win the popular vote by, I'm going to go ahead and say, at least 6 or 7 million.
Wow. What is that percentage wise, do you think? Like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the scale there. Is that like 5% or something?
Probably something. Well, it's 330 by that. So
not everybody votes, right?
That'd actually be like 0.3%, right?
Well, not everybody votes, so it's a skewed number.
Well, the thing is the Democrat Party is going to implode. They're going to go ahead and force feed Joe Biden down the leftist progressive wing of the Democrat Party, and none of them are going to vote, just like they didn't for Hillary.
Well, I don't know who my favorite is of the Democrats yet, but I felt like when Bloomberg, when I saw that he was running, my initial reaction was, it seems like a logical play. Like, it seems like that would actually
But he's an old white millionaire.
I'm hoping one day I'll be an old white millionaire, so what am I supposed to do?
You're different than a lot of the people in the Democratic Party these days. The AOC wing, the Maxine Waters wing, the Elizabeth Warren wing will not stand for a crusty old white billionaire to become the government. And on top of that, you're going to have a lot of Democrats who like to hunt and own guns who are not going to be in favor of Boomberg.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing to call him is Boomberg, not Bloomberg. You know, the okay boomer thing. He's a boomer. So Boomberg.
Okay, boomer. Yeah, that's funny too. The internet's crazy these days, isn't it? There's all sorts of funny things on there.
I laugh about that, but it's about the most disrespectful thing I can think of, because the people that they're using that disparaging comment against are people that we wouldn't even fucking be alive here if it weren't for them. The boomer generation are the people who, have made this world what it is. We're living their legacy, good and bad.
I think we'll wrap it up here soon, but this is a good transition. I would encourage you, if you haven't yet watched my podcast with Jerry Liu, Become the Dragon. I talk about God the Father. I break down the Holy Trinity and like what it kind of means to me, and it relates to the boomers. It's like we should be thankful. We should be thankful for them, but we also shouldn't think that everything they handed us is perfect,
your mother, Jordan, is probably a boomer.
You broke.
I said your mother is probably a boomer. Or your father.
My dad definitely is. My dad definitely is. My mom's probably close. My mom's 10 years younger than my dad, or 9 anyway. But my dad definitely is. But well, we're not gonna get into my dad right now. But hey, it was great talking with you, young sir. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's fun.
Keep following us, man. I got a good one coming on this week. Mike Roski coming on Thursday. He's a kind of vocal, active person there on social media. Pretty smart guy. I think he's got a high IQ. I don't necessarily agree with everything he's saying. I think he makes some good points. So we'll see where that conversation goes.
Good. Yeah, I'll keep on you, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, sir. Much love to you. Tell Amy I said thank you again, and send some love to the JRE people as well for me.
I will, Jordan.
Take care, sir. Thank you.
Later.
Bye-bye.